Hi, my name is Ivan Wado, and today I'll be talking about how I'm going to compare and contrast the 1997 Asian financial crisis to the 2008 financial crisis for my advanced topics in economics global online academy course. So first of all, the reason why I chose this topic was because in the future I want to be in the financial side of economics, and I want to see myself working in Wall Street. And instead of focusing on the positives and why certain things happen, I wanted to focus on the recessions and the bad stuff, and basically how different economists and different recessions have been implemented and different economic concepts implemented to improve from that particular recession. So the two I've been focused on today are the 1997 Asian financial crisis and the 2008 financial crisis. So first of all, between 1997, the June 1997, and January 1998, a financial crisis occurred unexpectedly to the tiger economies of Southeast Asia, and those tiger economies include Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Hong Kong, and South Korea. And what is really interesting is what before the recession, these tiger economies are actually they were the only reasons Asia was doing so well at that time, because of these countries. And the crisis actually initiated in Thailand, and that's exactly what this picture is showing. So it started in Thailand after Thai baht plummeted down as the Thai government was forced to float their currency because of the lack of foreign currency to support its exchange rate with the United States dollar. So if you just focusing on this entire graph, so this is how the economy was actually increasing, but at the 1997, these are different countries in Southeast Asia which actually had dropped. And if you see, Indonesia is where we live right now, and that all the other Southeast Asian countries were affected because of this flotation. Focusing over here, like I said, the currencies, and again, just the graph showing the decrease in the Thai stock market from Jan 1997 to when it started, all the way up till the end of the year, and slowly by slowly it was decreasing. So the next one, I'm really just giving background information, is the 2008 financial crisis. And that was initiated due to the housing bubble as financial markets crashed due to rating companies' false ratings for more profit. Moreover, people thought that the housing market was too strong. However, the awful misconception was caused by the 2000, and that was the reason of the 2008 financial crisis. In 2008, a lot of real estate was increasing steady, and it was a strong industry with a lot of public investment. However, the banks took advantage of the situation, and in the long run, they caused mortgage paper insurance bankers to get called on their guarantees, and that created the housing bubble. So what happens is, this is the stock market in the United States from 2006 to 2008, and that's exactly when the housing bubble started and the crisis occurred. The reason I chose this picture was Lehman Brothers was one of the main banks which actually was really affected during the 2008 financial crisis, and today they are no more because of the housing bubble incident. So now I'm going to be really focusing on the introduction of the economic solutions which are used to implement and to improve to get back to long-run equilibrium. So initially, in the 1997 financial crisis, a discretionary monetary policy was used to revive the economy, and however that flawed. And what happened was that actually caused the entire economy to go further back from the long-run equilibrium. And what they did was later, about 8 months, 8.5 months later, they used expansionary monetary policy to revive the economy, to try and get it back. So what happens is, this is another picture describing the 2008 one, and this is exactly what happened. And that's exactly where, so this basically shows how the discretionary monetary policy actually decreased even more, and then the expansionary monetary policy tried to increase it back. And in 2008, they used the expansionary fiscal policy to revive the economy, and that was like a bunch of many other economists have said the best solution, because, and I will go along in that in the future later on, but it says if they use other solutions like the monetary fiscal policy, it would have created a loop like they did in 1929. So the discretionary monetary policy, what happens is, it's basically it's basically a sharp decrease in consumer spending and business confidence. So what happened in that case was that decrease aggregated to the left, and that basically could be reflected over the time with the personal consumption. So in this particular argument, it shifts the left to the IS curve in the IS-LM model, and basically assumption of decreasing output, increasing interest rates, and decreasing output Y. So that was already a situation, and basically what happened was, since they were already in a recession, it moved it more left, causing them to be in a greater recession, and that was not a suitable economic solution to try to revive it back. And in the future, what happened was, so this is exactly where they were, and since the AD decreased, into the price level increased, and real GDP increased too. So like I mentioned earlier, so this is how the 1997 financial crisis occurred, and this is when they used the discretionary policy, because that was when it was lowest in their GDP ever. And then slowly, since the expansionary monetary policy was implemented, it slowly went back and tried to equal up. So the discretionary policy actually made the recession even further, and then to revive that, to try and get back to long-run equilibrium, they used an expansionary monetary policy. However, that did not be as effective as they thought it would be. So this is the expansionary monetary policy and the advantages of which they use. So the Thai government purchased government bonds from the United States using funds from different Southeast Asian countries, which were not implemented in this. An example of that is through Singapore was a very developed country, and they actually borrowed money from Singapore that time. And what happens to offset the leftward shift from initial effects of the discretionary monetary policy, it moved from Y dash to Y double dash. However, they were at Y initially, and even today, they have not come back to where Y was initially. And the reason I can say that with my own personal experiences, using Indonesia as one of the examples, in 1997, the Indonesian rupiah to the US dollar was about 3,200 rupiah, and today it's about 58,000 rupiah, even including inflation in all these situations. With my calculations and extensive research, I figured out, and other economists have figured out, that if they had not used the discretionary monetary policy initially and straight away went with an expansionary monetary or expansionary fiscal policy, today, including inflation, it would have been at 7,500 rupiah. So that just shows it's about double the effect of that discretionary monetary policy. So if they had implemented an expansionary policy, fiscal or monetary, the rupiah value and other Southeast Asian currencies would have been much more closer to the US dollar than they are today. So like I mentioned, reduced interest rates and increase in credit as liquidity spreads and more physical money is in the economy. So so basically this is talking about when the recession started in 1997, and slowly, as you can see, this is when the policy started, and then discretionary policy dropped it even more lower. However, the expansionary monetary policy started, and they started getting back to where they are. And this is a graph from 1995 to 2005 showing how after. This is not when the 2008 economy had recession, so this is still increasing, and of course the 2008 economy had dropped the other Southeast Asian currencies too. So now we're focusing on the expansionary fiscal policy, which was used in the 2008 housing bubble, which actually was the best solution. So according to my research, 1.1% of the GDP at that particular time was used to stimulate aggregate demand increases. So that's 1.1% of 16.7 trillion US dollars. So an increase in government spending, which is a rightward shift in the LM curve in this graph, which basically implemented higher output. So like I mentioned earlier was that a lot of economists say that the increase in fiscal policy and expansionary fiscal policy was the best solution, because if monetary policy was used, it would fall into a liquidity trap, and that could not stimulate the investment further, and that would create the loop of how it would happen in 1929, and that would have not been sufficient to improve the economy from where they were and how to stimulate back to long-run equilibrium. So the fiscal policy was appropriate to deflation. The consequences were seen in the major problems in Asia in 1997. So one of the economists has also said that in 1997, what happened in 2008 was the US government learned from the 1997 Thai implementation of the Thai baht situation. And what it is, they wanted to make sure that when they try to revive the economy, it wasn't that they use a discretionary policy or something to make the economy go back instead of going forward. So if fiscal policy was not implemented, like I mentioned earlier, interest rates would shift the IS curve, and hence the AS curve would be left, respectively, creating that loop which I mentioned earlier, or also known as the vicious downward cycle. So the fiscal rates adopted were appropriate to avoid deflation, and like I mentioned earlier, instead of using the 1997 Asians policy, they implemented their own, and that has been the most efficient and successful so far. So economic conclusions, basically in 1997, through my extensive research and guide from economists, they should have used a fiscal policy or an expansionary fiscal or monetary policy to revive the economy instead of using a discretionary monetary policy first. And in 2008 the fiscal policy was the best solution to get back to long-run equilibrium, because this created deflation. This created deflation, and it would not have created that vicious cycle loop. An overall conclusion is that till today we can see that I spoke about 4 different policies: 2 discretionary and 2 expansionary in a fiscal and monetary sense. So there is no one theory which will always work in every single situation, and depending on different situations of different recessions, each recession has their own advantages and disadvantages, and basically that's why there is that one situation or economic theory which would work in every single situation. So when an economy is facing a crisis, it's not only for that country. That's another thing we learned from these 2 situations, because in 1997, like I mentioned, it affected all the tiger economies, which include Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia. And in 2008, it was actually very, very global, because that affected, since the US is such a powerful economy, that affected all Asian, European, and Australian economies. So what my one-step solution would have been, one solution to try and improve in a recession, because a recession is a part of the business cycle. You have your tops, you have your bottoms, and you cannot stop recessions, but the best thing you want to do is to try and minimize it to be as flat as possible. So what I said, one of my solutions was to basically group the countries and resources to recover from recession. So for example, if we take Thailand, if another recession happened today, it would cut ties from Indonesia, Singapore, and other tiger economies to make sure that instead of 6 countries affecting from a recession, only 1 does. And what Thailand could do is utilize those resources which Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia give them to try and get it back to long-run equilibrium using a fiscal or monetary expansionary policy. And what could happen in that case is, because instead of having 5 countries, 1 country gets affected, and it's not like you're cutting ties, it's just you're using other people's resources to try and get you back and then pay them back towards the end. And in the big picture, so basically in the big picture, talking about financial crisis, the government must step in to regulate. That's what I believe is one of the biggest things, because we have spoken about concepts, but there are supply-siders and a variety of other concepts, but I believe that to get a recession back to long-run equilibrium, the fastest and more efficient way, it has to be by government stepping in. So the Fed, like I mentioned, so banks could not regulate themselves as we saw in 2008, and therefore without government oversight, a global crisis could happen in the future. So this was my compare and contrasting my 1997 Asian financial crisis to the 2008 financial crisis presentation. Thank you very much.